Hi everyone, welcome to our Channel Fun. Douglas Macgregor highlights that the source of political funding isn't mysterious, it's predominantly from donors, not voters. He emphasizes that these donors not only sway elections, but also influence politicians, often indifferent to public concerns. Macgregor expresses concern that influential interests prioritize overseas matters over domestic issues like border security, potentially impacting national cohesion. He suggests that the influx of immigrants, both legal and illegal, may dilute the traditional fabric of American society, turning it into a financial haven until economic downturns occur. He hopes viewers have watched Sound of Free, a revealing documentary shedding light on various issues, including child trafficking. The film provides a sobering glimpse into the horrors, highlighting the plight of children smuggled from places like Ukraine into the United States, where they often vanish without trace. Estimates of the number of children trafficked annually range from 50,000 to 80,000, indicating a distressing reality of pedophilia markets within the country. He mentions significant players in addressing immigration, such as Hebrew Immigration Aid headed by Alejandro Mayorkas, the current director of Homeland Security.
The involvement of organizations like Catholic Charities underscores the complexity of the issue. Further, he points to investigative work by Michael Young in Panama's Darien region, exposing extensive trafficking networks. The problem isn't confined to international routes but also pervades American cities like San Francisco, New York, and Chicago. He suggests a deliberate orchestration to dilute the American population's identity and loyalty, transcending political divides.
He acknowledges instances of moral and ethical misconduct among lawmakers, contributing to a culture of moral laxity in Washington, akin to Sodom and Gomorrah on the Potomac. There's a figure Americans should equate themselves with: Lee Kuan Yew, the architect of Singapore's remarkable success. Despite facing internal opposition, particularly from affluent quarters, Lee Kuan Yew transformed Singapore into a prosperous city-state. To combat rampant criminality, especially drug abuse, he resorted to executing criminals, a practice once common in the United States, ensuring law and order prevailed. Today, however, America's judicial system appears lenient, failing to instill fear in criminals. The absence of robust law enforcement, evident even along the border, reflects a systemic breakdown. Reflecting on history, he recalls America's decisive response to threats like Pancho Villa's incursion, mobilizing troops to safeguard its borders and curb lawlessness. Contrastingly, contemporary challenges such as the opioid crisis claim over 110,000 American lives annually, with children also becoming victims of heinous crimes. He questions the morality of those claiming Christian values, yet supporting such atrocities. While the president of El Salvador receives acclaim for his efforts at CPAC, Washington remains indifferent to implementing similar measures essential for national survival. Politicians, in addition to pursuing money, also tail public opinion rather than leading it. Rarely does a political figure articulate why certain actions are necessary and guide the electorate accordingly. Presently, both sides of the political spectrum acknowledge the public's focus on border issues. Biden's visit to the border, while possibly accompanied by indulgence in ice cream, may not significantly impact the situation. Critiques of Trump's unfulfilled promises, such as building the wall, underscore the recurring theme of politicians prioritizing self-interest and donor satisfaction over genuine change. Figures like Mr. Johnson, who professes devout Christianity, are called upon to demonstrate their principles through action, especially concerning global crises like the situation in Israel or Ukraine. The narrative of Russian aggression requires critical examination. Given the context of self-defense, voters must scrutinize actions rather than rhetoric, as evidenced by the rampant criminality in cities like San Francisco and New York, which have become hubs of lawlessness and moral decay. Arguably worse than some developing nations, some may recall the Marielle vote list, a relic from the Carter presidency when efforts were underway to rebuild the military post-Vietnam. However, policies like admitting criminals from regimes like Castro's, Cuba, and Venezuela's empty jails hardly align with the American ethos. Assertions of friendship or alignment with American values are dismissed as mere rhetoric. These individuals aren't contributors to the nation's prosperity, but potential liabilities. Criticism of Schumer's purported concern for Ukrainian civilization is dismissed as hollow, considering the US's involvement in conflicts like the proxy war in Ukraine. Driven more by strategic interests than genuine altruism, the primary goal of U.S. foreign policy remains stability, essential for conducting commerce, which historically has been the cornerstone of American power. The portrayal of Ukraine's military readiness is deemed misleading. Building a capable military force requires time and resources, both of which may not have been effectively utilized. Despite substantial aid, the recent reduction in the U.S. Army size reflects broader challenges in maintaining military readiness, casting doubts on its capability. Compared to smaller nations like Ukraine, which have faced significant losses in their own conflicts, Ukrainian soldiers have tragically lost their lives, with varying estimates ranging from 500 to 30,000 casualties, illustrating the relentless toll of resistance in conflict zones. Meanwhile, the U.S. Army size has dwindled below 450,000, contradicting claims of imminent victory or substantial military capability. The persistence of falsehoods, akin to the Soviet Union's propaganda, persisted until its collapse, masking the grim realities of its society. Lying becomes a refuge when confronting the harsh truth proves unbearable. Reflecting on historical parallels, the delusion of inevitable victory persisted even as Hitler's regime crumbled, echoing sentiments found in contemporary Washington, D.C. Examining the current situation in Ukraine, the influx of Russian troops suggests a dire scenario with strategic movements towards key cities like Kharkiv and Dnipro. Moldova's alignment with NATO triggers further unrest, prompting Russian intervention to protect its citizens in Transnistria and Dnipro, potentially altering Ukraine's geopolitical landscape drastically. The ongoing conflict underscores the tragic toll on Ukraine and its people, akin to the struggles endured by previous regimes. The failure of European powers to recognize the unfolding catastrophe parallels historical misjudgments, highlighting the urgent need for awareness and action. It's notable that the Russian General Staff has been tasked with mobilizing an additional 800,000 troops, signaling their belief that diplomatic negotiations to end the conflict are unlikely. Despite a potential deal in Istanbul, the lack of resolve to pursue peaceful resolutions prolongs the tragedy unnecessarily. European armies, often characterized as boutique armies, lack the readiness for serious warfare, reflecting a broader trend in NATO's capability decline. The Polish forces, comparatively better prepared, still lack the capacity to confront the Russian military effectively. The absence of substantial international intervention in Ukraine exacerbates the situation, compounded by systemic corruption and illicit activities within the country. The leadership vacuum contributes to the ongoing chaos, with no decisive action taken to halt the crisis. Suggestions to redirect resources towards border security highlight broader issues within the military, including logistical deficiencies and inadequate manpower. Addressing drug trafficking along the Canadian border and the Great Lakes is also essential but often overlooked in Washington's priorities. In essence, the lack of decisive leadership perpetuates the crisis, highlighting the need for courageous and pragmatic interventions reminiscent of historical figures like Henry Clay in legislative history. Actions akin to what Mike Johnson advocates are crucial. The absence of American patriots willing to prioritize the nation's well-being perpetuates the ongoing crises. It remains imperative to heed perspectives from figures like President Trump and President Biden, though attributing the conflict solely to personal dynamics is simplistic and misguided. Mr. Putin's rationality and desire for normalcy with the West underscore the need for balanced responses to geopolitical developments. The establishment of American bases in Northern Europe, while understandable from a security standpoint, exacerbates tensions and elicits understandable reactions from Russia. The imperative for sobriety in European capitals, especially Berlin and Warsaw, is paramount to de-escalating the situation. Statements like those made by leaders such as Andrzej Wajda, characterizing Russia as a nation that shouldn't exist, only serve to escalate tensions further. While leadership changes may offer hope for diplomacy, rebuilding trust and mutual confidence will be a gradual and arduous process. Irrespective of political rhetoric, the atmosphere is thick with mutual suspicion, fear, and distrust. RFK Jr. may want to consider urging President Biden to remove his father's bust from the Oval Office, as it seems inconceivable that Bobby Kennedy would have viewed Joe Biden favorably.